Kennyo, our conflict began after I took control of Kyoto, did it not? Tell me again how powerful your Honganji temple was at that time. Nobunaga Dono, it is true that we, Honganji, had great power. We had a large number of believers and were particularly influential in the Kinai region. This was the result of spreading teachings that supported the people's hearts and minds. That's right, and as I sought to unify the country, your power became an obstacle. Especially when I attacked Ishiyama Honganji in 1570, your resistance was more fierce than I had expected. Nobunaga Dono, we had to fight for our survival against that attack. The believers valued Honganji not just for its religious beliefs, but also as a place to live. I suppose so, but my side also needed to consolidate control of the Kinai region. Your independence cast a shadow over my plans. From our standpoint, Lord Nobunaga's policies were oppressive to our faith and life. Therefore, we had no choice but to resist. That was the spark for a protracted battle. Siege, attack, peace, repeat. But my military power alone was not enough to solve the problem, and I had to change my strategy. Indeed, the battle took many sacrifices. We also had to seek outside help. We also developed alliances with other feudal lords, such as the Mori clan. For me, too, the partnership was uncalculated. I never thought you and Mr. Mori would team up. To survive, it was sometimes necessary to join forces with the enemies of the enemy. Nobunaga Dono would have done the same thing. Yes, they did. Eventually, peace was reached in 1580. But the process was not easy for either side. How did you feel when you agreed to abandon Ishiyama Honganji and move to Omi? It was a very difficult choice. But more than that, protecting the congregation and our families was a priority. Because our teachings do not change no matter where we are. That decision paved the way for my unification of the country. But my confrontation with you was also an important experience from which I had much to learn. Dear Nobunaga, our conflict is over, but how do you think the experience has affected future generations? It is an example of how much conflict with religious forces can affect national politics. Separation of religion and politics, this became part of my policy. History always contains lessons, doesn't it? I am sure that our battle was also a learning experience for many. That's right, Kennyo. I hope your teachings will continue to bring peace to people's hearts. Dear Mr. Nobunaga, I also hope that the day will come when we can work together to build a better future for both of us. Nobunaga Dono, there was more than just a power struggle behind the Ishiyama War. Our conflict for control of Kyoto is the result of the close intertwining of religion and politics. I'll grant you that, but what exactly would you say the entanglement is? The Honganji of Lord Kennyo had a huge network of believers centered in Kyoto, which formed its own economic sphere. This was a major force for its commercial and political independence. Indeed, its power cannot be overlooked. But it was a major obstacle to my goal of unifying the country. That is true. However, to his followers, Lord Kennyo was more than just a religious leader. To them, he was also a political leader. That is the essential point of conflict with me. Kennyo's rise to political power was only a threat to my reign. However, Kennyo-sama was not using Honganji as a mere political tool. For him, the well-being of his followers was of utmost importance. What is happiness? For me, happiness is peace under heaven, and for that I needed a strong centralized power. Nobunaga Dono, that centralized peace oppressed many local and religious forces. This gave rise to rebellion and resistance. Regardless of the backlash, my purpose is unwavering. But why did Kennyo go to such lengths to resist? For Lord Kennyo, Honganji and the believers were one and the same, and it was his mission to protect their lives and faith. The policies of Nobunaga Dono threatened this. A mission. But didn't you think that mission would be an obstacle in the way of my unification of the world? Lord Kennyo also wanted peace. However, if that peace meant being placed under the complete control of Nobunaga Dono, it was unacceptable. If you wanted peace, you could have found a way to avoid fighting. Why did you choose to fight? This was because Honganji and its congregation had to choose it as a last resort in order to protect their own faith and autonomy. Own faith and autonomy. Was it that important? Yes, it was very important. It was not just a faith, but the foundation of their lives and the social order itself. I understood that. That's why I tried to unite them under one order. But because of the rigidity of the method, it created a lot of resistance. That could have been avoided. You think I could have avoided it? What would you say I should have done? If Lord Nobunaga had been a little more tolerant and had proceeded in a way that allowed for local independence and autonomy, there might have been less resistance. Tolerance. However, in the face of the great cause of unification, a little tolerance can lead to a great disturbance. That is certainly a reasonable point. But isn't it also necessary to constantly question what the greater good is? What is this cause you speak of? It is to create a society in which people can live in peace. Isn't that the true cause? And the battle for this was the Ishiyama War? Yes, it was. It was a defensive battle, a fight for faith and autonomy. I see, you have a point. But in the end, peace was reached. What do you think about that? Kennyo, it has been a long time since the end of the Ishiyama War. What do you think about the settlement at that time now? Dear Nobunaga, I still believe that reconciliation was the best choice for both sides. If the war had continued, more blood would have been spilled and destruction would have only spread. That is certainly true, but it was essential for my ambition of unifying the country to suppress the power of the Ikkō-ikki sect. From our standpoint, the policies of Lord Nobunaga threatened our religious freedom, but as a result, compromises had to be made to keep the congregation safe. Through the war one also learned a lot, especially about the influence of religious forces and how to deal with them. It is the same for me. In order to counter the overwhelming military power of Nobunaga Dono, we too had to deepen our cooperation with the outside world. That alliance with the outside world became an unforeseen challenge for me. In particular, the alliance with the Mori clan complicated the war situation. Our collaboration with the Mori clan made our resistance more protracted and powerful. In some respects, however, it has ultimately facilitated peace. During the peace process, I was forced to make many compromises. I saw a resolution to the problem by moving Honganji to Omi, but there was some anguish in that decision. This is the first time I have heard of the anguish of Nobunaga Dono. It was a great blow for us too to leave our homeland. However, considering the future of his followers, he said it was for the best. Kennyo, dialogues with a strong opponent like you have helped me to hone my political skills. Nobunaga Dono, I am honored by your words. I too have learned much from my confrontation with Nobunaga Dono, especially about the balance between power and faith. A balance of power and faith. That will be an important theme in future reigns. Yes, you are right. To win people's hearts and minds, we need to look at faith and culture, not just power. Kennyo, it is always stimulating to talk with you. Our experiences will be important lessons for future generations. Dear Nobunaga, I hope so too. Our reconciliation shows that confrontation is not the only way to shape history. Indeed, conflict and reconciliation, both are part of our history. It has shaped our time. And that is a lesson for the future. For history teaches and guides us repeatedly. Kennyo, I have gained much insight through this dialogue today. Discussions with you always deepen my thinking. Dear Nobunaga, I agree with you. It was a meaningful time for both of us. I hope to cherish such opportunities in the future. You are right, Kennyo. We must always consider what future leaders can learn from our past experiences. I deeply agree with what Nobunaga Dono said. We must learn history and apply it to the future. That is our responsibility. Kennyo, at the time of the Battle of Soksan, your resistance to the attack that our army launched was more fierce than I had imagined. How were you feeling at that time? Dear Nobunaga, at that time, I was just doing my best to protect my congregation. I had to face any difficulties to prevent them from losing their lives and their place of faith. That is understandable, but I, too, had to choose hard measures for the cause of unifying the country. I now regret the pain that this caused you at times. I am surprised that Nobunaga Dono would feel remorse. However, I am a little relieved to hear those words. We, too, wanted to avoid a battle. But in the face of the onrushing army, we had no choice. Wartime decisions are always heavy, and in hindsight we often wonder if there could have been another way. Kennyo, how did you deal with your congregation after your relocation? Life in a new place was difficult, but I persevered with the congregation and built community again. The bond I formed with them became my greatest support. Bonds. I, too, have cherished the bonds I have formed with many of my vassals. But sometimes I have to make a decision to send them off to battle. That is my way. Such a decision must have been necessary for Nobunaga Dono. However, does it not make you feel bitter that the result of such a decision would be the loss of so many lives? It can feel heartbreaking at times, but we must look at the big picture and sometimes make tough choices. That is the fate of a ruler, the destiny of the reigning ruler. That word has a lot of weight to it. As religious leaders, we too have a responsibility to guide the hearts and minds of our congregations. That responsibility is the same one that sometimes requires us to make critical decisions. Kennyo, I feel the pressure of leadership from your words, but it is because you overcame that pressure that you have become a strong organization. That's right. By overcoming difficulties, we have become stronger. Isn't that the same for you, Nobunaga Dono? Indeed, we grow by overcoming difficulties. That is the path of a military commander and a ruler. But it is also true that this path involves many sacrifices. Sacrifice. We too have lost many members of our congregation. It still weighs heavily on my heart. Hearing Kennyo's sentiments, I also reflected on them. I wonder if we could not have done things in a more peaceful way. History continues to ask us such questions. But the answers are not always clear. It is precisely because there are no clear answers that we will continue to move forward. I learn a lot from my conversations with you, Kennyo, and it makes me think. Dear Nobunaga, I feel the same way. By understanding each other's position, we will be able to leave lessons for the future. Lessons for the future, huh? Well, that may be the most important significance of this dialogue of ours. Yes, that is correct. We should always be aware of what our experience will tell future generations. Kennyo, there is always something new to be discovered in a dialogue with you. I hope we can continue these discussions in the future. Dear Mr. Nobunaga, I hope so as well. I believe that a better future will be built through a better understanding of each other. Let's talk about the impact of the Kennyo, the Ikkō-ikki and the Ishiyama War on the social structure of the Kennyo region. In particular, I would like to delve into how the power of the Jodo Shinshu sect was deeply rooted in the society and economy of the region. Indeed, Nobunaga Dono, the society of believers formed around Honganji, was very unique in the Kennyo region. Our organization was more than just a religious group. It was also heavily involved in economic activities. So that point clashed with my unification policy. How did your economic power affect the local market and commerce? We supported trade and distribution of goods among our followers. This made the area around Honganji a rich commercial area and a gathering place for many people. In other words, your presence was stimulating the local economy. But please elaborate on how that conflicts with my policy. Nobunaga Dono's policy was to concentrate local power in the center. On the other hand, Honganji Temple emphasized regional autonomy and independence. This created a conflict with Nobunaga Dono's policy of centralization. I see, your emphasis on regional independence clashed with my policy of wanting control. But what effect did this local independence have on the culture? Honganji Temple also functioned as a cultural center. The tea ceremony, literature, and performing arts flourished, which contributed to the development of local culture. Was there a significant cultural influence as well? That is an area I have overlooked. But I would like to know more about how that culture influenced my policy. The cultural policies promoted by Nobunaga Dono, especially in the tea ceremony, were influenced by the culture that developed in the Honganji area. Nobunaga himself was also a tea ceremony aficionado, and the area became a place where the cultures of both sides could interact. It is true that I interacted with many cultural figures through the tea ceremony. It is true that your culture influenced my policies. But did those exchanges ever mitigate political conflicts? Although cultural exchanges rarely resolve direct political conflicts, there is no denying that they have helped to deepen mutual understanding. Culture sometimes has the power to transcend political barriers. That's a heavy word. Perhaps we should have taken more into account the power of culture. But how did economic activity change during the war? During wartime, general commercial activities were greatly restricted as many resources were directed toward the war effort. However, Honganji continued to conduct economic activities with limited resources in order to support the lives of its followers. The impact of the war on the local economy is significant. I should have learned the wisdom of how you guys responded to that as well. Wartime economic strategy was also a survival strategy. It also became the foundation for later economic recovery in times of peace. War and peace. How to adapt our economic strategy in each period, that is the key issue. We can learn a lot from your experience, Kennyo. Dear Nobunaga, I hope that our experience can give you some insight into his policies. History is something we can learn from each other. Kennyo, after all this time, let me hear your truth about the battle back then. Dear Nobunaga, I tell you the truth. Our resistance was not just a battle for survival, but to defend religious freedom and local autonomy. Those words, even if I hear them now, will not change the pain. But my purpose was also to end the turbulent world and unite the country. I understand the purpose of Nobunaga Dono. However, his methods were sometimes too strong. Many innocent people were sacrificed, and that weighs heavily on my mind. Kennyo, I admit that you are right that my means have been extreme. At times, my excessive ambition has caused people to suffer. I did not think that Lord Nobunaga would approve of that. Hearing that makes me feel a little lighter. But, Kennyo, your resistance was also a great test for my army. Your firm beliefs were a factor in changing my mind. Dear Nobunaga, our firm beliefs were closely tied to the lives of our followers. We fought to protect their lives. I cannot deny, Kennyo, that your firm conviction has at times shaken my heart. Your strong resistance has given me much to think about as well. Hearing your words has given me a new understanding as well. Dear Nobunaga, I hope that this conversation today will build a new bridge between us. Kennyo, your dialogues with me have always been inspiring. But looking back now, I regret that we should have had this dialogue earlier. I feel the same way. If dialogue had been established earlier, many sacrifices could have been avoided. Kennyo, I can say now that your beliefs were sometimes a light that illuminated my heart. It may have changed me. We sincerely appreciate your words. Nobunaga-sama. It is a relief to know that our beliefs meant something to Nobunaga Dono as well. Kennyo, I am grateful to be here now to have a sincere discussion with you. It makes me think again about what our actions have meant throughout history. Dear Mr. Nobunaga, I also thank you. I hope that this dialogue today will help you to see our history in a new light. Kennyo, if our dialogue can serve as a lesson for someone in the future, I could not be more pleased. That's right. We sincerely hope that our experience will be useful to those who live in the future. Thank you, Kennyo, for your valuable talk today. Thank you very much, Mr. Nobunaga. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank our readers for their interest in history and for listening to us. Thank you from me as well. I hope that our past will cast light on your future.